Welcome to a presentation on discussion coaching. So here are the questions we'll look over during this presentation. How are you coaching your students toward a meaningful discussion? How do you get them to show up? How do you get them interacting? How do you model meaningful inquiry and exchange? Well, the first thing is you got to be there. Now, some instructors may have a misunderstanding coming into this that you're going to somehow steal students' fire by showing up and being fully engaged in the first few weeks. Not so. There's a way to do that without stealing responses from students. You can be there interacting, modeling the behaviors you want, particularly in orientation in week 1 and 2. You want to set a tone of engagement, positivity, inquiry, enthusiasm, and then you can begin to pull back, depending on the class chemistry. Sometimes you get groups of students where it is pulling teeth all term to get them to discuss, and other times they're off to the races in week 1 and you can gradually just pull back and be monitoring and hovering, dipping in, making a comment or a question here or there, joining forces where you see two students who could be talking more to one another, those kinds of things. But ultimately in the beginning, you have to make sure you are in there coaching and engaging, asking lots of questions and connecting students. So that's the first thing. Make sure you are a regular presence. And then you're doing all that. Let's say you're thinking, I'm doing my best, I'm a regular presence, but they're just not showing up. So what's the problem? Well, a lot of times it is a conundrum to solve, right? So we have to use a lot of different strategies, and we have to think like a rising 8th, 9th, or 10th grader. What's going to motivate and encourage them to go to the discussions on a regular basis? Well, here are a couple tips, and our faculty is full of even better ones than these, so definitely crowdsource and talk to your fellow instructors. If you want ideas, talk to your academic coordinator. Here's a few things you can look at. You can create a space in the asynchronous discussion forums that when you get kids talking at a fever pitch in the live session, they have a place to go afterwards so they can continue the conversation. And a hint, this is a great alternate assignment for the kids who cannot attend. They have this space to go to, and you say, let's take this to the parking lot. Role play. Give them an actual role of the discipline to play. For example, in a criminal law and justice course, someone plays the judge, you play the juror. Maybe someone is the medical intern and someone else is the resident. How can you give them a problem or question to solve together where they're playing a particular role? That's kind of exciting. It's getting to try on the roles and dress rehearsals for the discipline. Partner people up or put them in triads or quads. Maybe they're doing peer review. Maybe they're working on a problem set, and they're using the discussion as a space for compliment call-outs or working together. Maybe they leave their critique in the Google documents elsewhere, which are linked there in the discussion, but you're using the space for support or problem solving, or just idea sharing. And that's where collaboration can come in too, where they can prepare for a group project together and propose steps and ideas for how they're going to organize, execute, come together with the best ideas for the project. A couple other ideas here. Dress rehearsal for the live session. Let's go here, have an asynchronous conversation, do some pre-work. I'm going to put you in pairs or triads, or maybe it's just the whole class. Whoever wants to practice this tough question, you can get ready here before we go into the live session, which is different than the ticket to the session we sometimes model in our training, where you give them some kind of low-level knowledge and comprehension questions to prepare for. This one is more a deeper Socratic question that they can rehearse before the live session, especially if you have a group of students who are less likely to get on the mic and kind of nervous. This is a great thing to warm them up, start their engines before they get to you. A really low stakes, fun, what if, speculative question with a more academic Socratic question is a great pairing, because if you ask a low stakes, let's predict what the future will look like 100 years from now, and yeah, you got to have some evidence and research for that, but it's a little bit more imaginative and creative in their predictions, and they can do a little more creative brainstorming. So that could pull some kids into doing discussions. Using audio, video, multimedia resources, images are a great way to get kids together. So they have to post some kind of an image, or they have to analyze an image. Both of these last two ideas require students to bring something to the table that's highly visual or audio related, and then they have to do an analysis, or they have to do a really pithy caption. So think about that as a way to get perhaps your less verbal kids who don't always like to write a long post. They might be really engaged, connecting in this way in the discussions. And here's 3 other ones too. Scavenger hunts work great. People have different research tasks. Student-led discussions Give people roles. Say, hey, it's week 3. We got to start stepping up, folks. I'm going to have you be our discussion captain. You are the facilitator this week. Hey, Joe, you're going to be inquiry master. Hey, Sarita, you're going to be devil's advocate. Or finally, a metacognitive space could be a low-stakes space. For some kids, this can be hard because they're having to be self-reflective. But if you're really trying to coach certain skills, whether they're course-specific skills or they are the e-studies more global learning behavior skills, metacognitive spaces in discussions can be a great place for kids to come together and talk about what they're learning and are they getting better at something. So, all right, let's say those ideas don't work. Here's a few more. You can cluster kids. You can assign people to groups, and you can take the kids who are the most likely to do discussion and the social loafers and cluster your class into thirds. You can give role assignments. You can kind of get in there and really study the behaviors of a smaller group and really encourage them on a more one-to-one basis. You can talk to your academic coordinator about how to do this because you would set up the navigation in your course a little differently. You might want to wait before you do this. You either could do it in preterm or get some support with the navigation redo during the term. There's also a peer review function, which requires students to, you turn that on and they have to review other people's posts. Whatever you do, if you decide to go with these options, be sure to check in with your AC and he or she can help you out. Now, coaching, of course, is something natural to instructors. It's those verbal, compliments and, hey, you can do this kind of cheerleading and specific constructive criticism, and also just pure announcements, okay? Ways to remind people, but also celebrate publicly. Hey, I loved how last week Sarita was doing such and such in the discussion, and I hope everybody does something like this week. What a substantive post she gave us. Or, hey, I loved how Joe was doing all these really probing questions. So saying that publicly, saying that in individual emails is really meaningful too. And of course, group coaching, wherever you are there, remaining a presence in multiple threads, modeling, questioning, complimenting, that sort of thing, especially, like we said, in the first weeks. So here's kind of a summary of the things you're doing when you're coaching. First of all, you model inquiry. If you're asking questions, you're not really stealing fire because our kids need a lot of training before they become expert question askers. So let them watch you in the first weeks. If you get stuck, go to your Coaching Socratic Thought resource and it'll give you questions you can just borrow outright and modify per the subject. Model summary. When you're in there in the discussions, summarize what a couple people have said up to that point. Say, I really liked how Sarita and Joe have drawn this out of the topic, and I think Mariana is also adding another element to this. So knowing that, how would you all answer this question? So you see how you move from a summary to an inquiry in just one post. Of course, you can also sneak in a couple compliments to just keep the positive vibes going. You can add a one-liner here or there in your post in a discussion, just say where you see people succeeding. And then you model that invitational behavior. Invite other people into the discussion by asking a question or saying, does anybody else have anything to say here? So that's maybe the last thing they see on the thread hanging out there. The instructor is calling for people to answer. And if no one answers within 24 hours, you get back on the announcements and say, hey, I got a question hanging out there. My feelings are hurt. How come no one's responding? Then finally, the other part of coaching that is so key is that you tell them where the finish line is, where the touchdown happens, and that is the standards for discussion. You remind them of the language in your rubrics and in those outcomes in your course, and you repurpose that language in your feedback. So it's a familiar set of words and phrases that keep coming back to them. Oh, that's what she means, or that's what he means by inquiry, or, by connecting to others' ideas. So again, just a couple summary thoughts here of your coaching. You got to have a great question, right? We've covered that in other presentations in professional development. You got to have good management. That's how you'll have busy discussions. But if you focus on just one and not the other, you could have this great party, but nobody came. So you may have to say, all right, do I need to redesign my questions? Do I need to clarify expectations for participation or restate them? Do I need to coach publicly? Do I need to coach privately? Do I need to try a redesign of the discussion purpose and roles? Are my kids behaving like pod people, like they just post and they're gone, no interaction? Maybe I need to try clustering them and putting them in groups so I can more closely observe these pod people's behaviors. Is it a happy village where everybody's just loving on each other, saying, yay, yay, everybody's great, but nobody's really thinking very deeply? Then try clarifying the expectations for secondary posts. Share with them the document resource we have called Let's Have a Socratic Discussion, and then reward students, badge students for exhibiting those behaviors. So that is our presentation. Thank you for listening.